Welcome back to Hour 2 of One Bills Live. Steve Tasker and Chris Trapasso. We're pleased to be joined now by NFL senior producer Greg Cosell, also co-host of ESPN's NFL Matchup. Greg Cosell's weekly appearance on One Bills Live is presented by Pepsi. Pepsi is the official soft drink of the Buffalo Bills. Food deserves Pepsi. Greg, thanks for being on with us. The Bills fans, it took them quite a minute. It took them a minute to turn the page from the Cincinnati game. Games like that are fun to watch and all of that, but to me, there have been a lot better football games that the Bills have played than that one. And, whenever Josh puts the cape on, I mean, everybody loves to see it, but that's kind of what happened, right?
Yeah, it's funny. I was watching that game, and I guess there's a part of me that roots for the Bills, Steve. I prefer to see them win than lose. I try to be objective, but I prefer to see the Bills win than lose. And I'm watching that game, and it gets to be 28-18, and I'm thinking this one's over. You might have felt
You're not
the same
alone.
way. There's no.
What do you think? I was thinking the same. I was thinking the same thing. I was like, man, this is going to be a long week.
Oh. Yeah, because obviously, if they had lost that game, they're just fighting for the playoffs. And again, they're not in yet, and a lot of things can change. We know that with still 4 to go. But look, we've talked about Josh Allen so many times. You guys know I believe he's the most physically talented, physically gifted quarterback in the league. But you cannot live in that world every week, Steve. You know that, where he has to make these plays that are just ridiculous. The play we're looking at right now to Shakir. It's funny, I watched that play over and over. I'm not sure if he was throwing to Shakir or if he was throwing to, I think it was Shavers behind him, but no one will say, but, they'll tell you he was throwing to Shakir, obviously, and maybe he was. But, and then, of course, this run, the Bengals, I'm not sure what they were thinking in certain situations where they had nobody to account for Josh Allen's scrambling ability. And that play, that 40-yard touchdown, they played zero with no one accounting for Josh. So, sometimes the defense has to help you at times as well. But, it's just hard to live in that world where you expect him to be Superman every single week.
Yeah, the Shakir play, and you're right. I don't know who he was throwing it to either. In fact, there was no place to put that football. He threw that. I don't know what he expected to happen. I can't tell you what he expected to happen when he let that ball go, because when he threw it, it was a disaster. And I have no idea how he expected any Buffalo Bill to catch that ball, and yet it looked as, good grief. It turned into a touchdown.
It's Josh Allen. In a different kind of way, it reminded me of that play. Was it a Thursday night game a couple of years ago against New England where he made that play with no time left at the end of the first half? And yes. I think that's who it was against. Am I right? Am I remembering that correctly?
I think it was I think a Dolphins Saturday night game in the snow. They wore the red jerseys.
Yeah. Chris, do you remember that?
Yes, exactly.
Where there was literally they were in field goal range, but that play, it took him to the end of the half, but he threw a touchdown, and it's one of those no, yes, but he has a lot of those. But like we said, it's tough to live like that.
Yeah, Greg, I have one more question about this previous game against the Bengals, because I've seen some takes on both sides, and what you pointed at, I think, makes a lot of sense. The Bills don't want to always live in this status of we need to just rely on Josh Allen being Superman. On the other side of the ball, did you come away from that film thinking that the Bills' defense is a problem, they didn't have a good game, or that Joe Burrow and not so much Jamar Chase, but Jamar Chase and T. Higgins, Mike Gesicki are just that dynamic when they're all together on the field?
Well, Chris, I've watched the Bills. I've been doing this with these guys for years and years. I've watched the Bills for years, literally every play. This may come across as a bold, controversial statement, and maybe some fans will hate me for it, but I don't know if they truly have an impact player on the defensive side of the ball. I think Oliver is the closest, and he's obviously hurt. I don't know if he'll be back. I guess he's trending toward coming back at some point. So when I'm watching the Bills, the thing I think Sean McDermott does exceptionally well, and I've actually had conversations with offensive coaches in the league about this, I think he's really, really good at changing the picture pre-snap to post-snap. But they don't really have a one-on-one pass rusher. At this point in time, you wouldn't say they have a great corner. I mean, Bedford, they signed, nice player. They're hoping, look, they drafted Hairston. They're hoping he turns into more than a nice player because he was a first-round pick. But, and Cole Bishop looks like he could become a really solid safety. But I feel like when I watch their defense that I don't feel like there's an impact defender that you feel like, well, that guy is going to be the guy that just makes plays when you need it. Bosa was out this week. He's probably the closest right now to a pass rusher that they have. Rousseau hasn't turned into exactly, I imagine, what they wanted. He's a good player, but, not that kind of guy. So I just, that's the way I feel about their defense. And I think and because of that, any given week against a good opponent can be a potential struggle.
Well, that's kind of what they've hung their hat on, right, Greg? I mean, even last year they got to the conference championship with a defense that was
no all-pros.
Like you said, it was just okay, but they had the ability. Right. The thing they did well was churn turnovers out. They did it all the way through the season. They did that. They were consistently winning the turnover battle. And that was good enough.
To do that every year. You know that, Steve. It's hard to go into a season and say, we're going to get 40 turnovers this year.
Right.
That's something you can't really say,
Right. And that's been the difference of late. Now, the Bills have, the playmaking defense, Benford is the point example. A touchdown in each of the last 2 weeks. He's the first Bills player in team history to have back-to-back defensive touchdowns, all of that. That's been their modus operandi. They either get turnovers or they have some guy, one guy, this guy, that guy, Epinesa tipping a ball or Jordan Phillips tipping a ball. Somebody makes a play on a game where they were getting lumped up.
Yeah. And look, those plays count, and the Bedford play was just a great athletic play. It's funny because they actually ran the exact same pressure to get a sack late in the first half with Bedford coming off the boundary corner, and then they ran that play, and it's a great play. You're not taking anything away from that play, but that's not necessarily a play you say, oh, we're gonna make that play, and then the very first play on the next series, the ball gets tipped, and it could get tipped and go somewhere else. You can't count on those kinds of plays. But hey, in that game it worked. So we'll look. They're 9-4. We'll see where it goes. I mean, obviously, we can turn our attention out of this week. They're playing a team that's played extremely well. What have they won? Is it 9 in a row? Is it?
10.
I think
10 in a row.
It's 10.
10.
10 in a row. Yeah.
Believe me, it's 10. Yeah, we've been talking about it all week. And this is the thing too. You tell me, Greg, as you've been around maybe as long as me. This Patriot team and Vrabel and his countenance on the sideline and the way they win and the way they play, and certainly they have not. They've got the easiest strength of schedule in the league.
Right.
So they haven't really had a gauntlet. But nevertheless.
10 in a row is 10 in a row.
10 in a row is 10 in a row. And they are playing, and see if you think this the same thing. This is exactly like an old Bill Parcells team. They just don't beat themselves. There's zero mistake. And when they make a mistake, it's like, it's like the worst possible thing in the world. You go off the sideline, it's like the first mistake you've seen in 2 weeks. You know what I mean?
No,
they're just very rare.
I mean, they're just a solid, fundamentally sound football team. I'm sure a lot of people didn't expect Drake Maye to take this kind of leap in his second year. But Josh McDaniels has been doing this a long time. I love the way he coaches Drake Maye. He's not simplifying the game for him. He's actually giving him everything and allowing him to develop as a quarterback. The one thing he does extremely well with him is there's a lot of the same concepts that they get to in many different ways, but the concepts are the same. And Steve, you know this from when you played, that's the way the pass game is most effectively taught. You deal in concepts. And then it's just a matter of how you get to them. You can get to them from multiple personnel packages, all kinds of different formation looks, motion shifts, but the concepts are the concepts. And I think they do a great job with Drake Maye in that so that it doesn't, overload his brain. And you know how it is. When it's 3rd and let's say 8, the quarterback's not expecting a potential of 30 possible play calls. He's expecting the 5 or 6 that you practiced all week. And sometimes I think fans think, oh, well, there's 30 plays to choose from. That's not the way it is. My guess is Drake Maye in pretty much every situation almost knows without even hearing the play call, from Josh, what it's going to be, because it's only going to be one of 5 or 6 concepts, and then it's just a matter of how we running it. What's the formation? Is there a motion? That kind of thing. So I think they've done a really, really good job with it, and he plays very comfortably.
Correct me if I'm wrong, Greg, but isn't that idea of getting to the same concepts from all different formations a lot of what Josh McDaniels did with Tom Brady? And it's, to me, so it's, I guess how I wanted to ask is piggybacking off that. What did you think of Drake Maye coming into the NFL out of the draft just in the 2024 class? And have you been impressed? Did you expect him to have this much on his plate and execute as efficiently as he has entering this game?
Well, in many ways, yes, Chris, and I'll tell you why. Because the quarterback coach at UNC when Drake Maye was there was Clyde Christensen. And Clyde Christensen, I've known him for years. He coached Tom Brady, he coached Andrew Luck, he coached Peyton Manning. And I was actually down at UNC. It was the year after Drake was gone, but Clyde was still there on that staff. And we talked quite a bit. And he told me that this kid is going to make it, that there's no question in his mind. Just the kind of personality he is, how smart he is, how mentally tough he is. So I'm not surprised. And I liked his traits a lot. There were a couple of, things in his game that I thought needed correcting, but they were coachable things. And by the way, no quarterback in college comes out as a finished product. I mean, sometimes fans think that, particularly if a guy plays well early. Oh, man, this guy's great. But, Chris, you've been doing this a long time. You do a lot of college work. No quarterback is a finished product coming out of college football. The games are totally different. So there's always something to work on, to keep getting better at. Look, even the great quarterbacks in this league, I guarantee if you would talk to defensive coordinators, who have to play against Josh or Patrick Mahomes, they tell you the 1 or 2 things that they're not great at, that they feel if they put together the right game plan that they can minimize. So no one is a 10 in every category. But I really liked Drake Maye's talent. I really liked the way he played. So I'm not surprised that he's developed, particularly with a coach like Josh McDaniels, who's been doing this a long time. And I'm a believer in that. I think, I think about this with Tennessee, and not that we're going to spend time talking about Tennessee, but that the biggest thing they have to do is get someone in that building with the absolute point of making Cam Ward great. Anything else is pointless, because then they're all going to be fired in 2 or 3 years if it doesn't happen.
Yeah, perfect segue there about Drake Maye for this quick follow-up. What are any weaknesses that you've noticed of his on film that maybe Bills fans can be looking for in this game on Sunday?
Well, I thought when he came out, and I think he's improved at it in the league, he was a drifter, Chris. He would tend, when he dropped back in the pocket, to drift, predominantly to his left. And what that does, of course, is you create your own pressure sometimes, because the offensive line is blocking a certain way and they're expecting you to be in a given spot based on the play call, especially if it's, drop back or play action where you're going straight back into the pocket. And if you start drifting, you create your own pressure and you make throws harder than they need to be. And he had a tendency in college to do that. And what you do then, because you start to feel the bodies, you start to feel squeezed, is you start to rush your throws. And then when you rush your throws, you lose accuracy. And there were times in college where his ball location, I'm sure you saw this, where his ball location wasn't exactly what you wanted it to be, because you start to rush. And I think that's definitely a coachable thing. Every once in a while, he'll do that, but it's better than it was in college.
Okay. So we just got the final practice report. It looks like Christian Benford, Terrell Bernard, and Joshua Palmer are all questionable for Sunday. Benford, I don't know if you knew, Christian Benford got a toe injury yesterday.
I know.
And he, Bernard, and Palmer are all questionable, but it looks like Bosa is good to go. Spencer Brown is good to go for the Bills on Sunday. But as you said, Bosa is a good player and has been really good, probably the most effective and consistent defensive lineman for the Bills, certainly the pass rusher. But is there anybody else that you're really worried about losing or having on the field? Because, as you said, this Bills defense is, it's 11 guys. There is no real game record.
That's what it is.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So do you worry about the injury report that much?
Well, if Bedford can't go, who'll be the outside corner then? Will they play?
It'll probably be Trey White and Max Hairston.
And Hairston. Yeah, and then Hairston will play all the snaps instead of in rotation.
Right.
Yeah, and look, that's you just got to then live with it. I mean, um, I think what they'll try to do is just slow down the mental processing for May. As I said, what Sean's really good at is changing the picture. And he actually did it a lot against Burrow, and Burrow's Burrow. I mean, he's one of those guys. Burrow's a computer chip. There's not many guys like Burrow who can see it. It just happens. It's innate. There are guys like that in every sport. I'm probably showing my age, but you guys, and I know Steve, you'll know this. But I mean, you can't just say to a guy, "Well, see the ice like Wayne Gretzky." Some guys can do that, some guys can't. Burrow's one of those guys. But I think you'll see Sean do a lot of that, and hope that he just slows down the process for Drake Maye.
On the Patriots side, Greg, I want to ask you on the defensive side of the ball. They have some injuries too. Robert Spillane dealing with an injury, Harold Landry, and looking at it from an analytics perspective, and I know you're mostly film, but I'm looking at it as the Patriots last year were 31st in EPA per play allowed on defense. Now they're 10th. What have you seen from watching Patriots defensive film that you think are the core reasons for such a seismic jump from one of the worst defenses in football to truly one of the best this year?
Well, I hate to show my ignorance, but I don't even know what that means, what you said, but about EPA.
Why were they bad? Why were they bad last year? And why are they good this year?
Pretty much that's what I meant. That's what I meant.
Well, first of all, I think they got better in terms of talent. I mean, I know he missed some time, but and I don't know if he's due. I guess he's not due back for this game either. Milton Williams, but Milton Williams was a major upgrade on their defensive front. Barmore's played exceptionally well this season. Spillane is one of those guys. He may not be a household name, Chris, but I got to tell you, when he was in Pittsburgh, he ended up being the linebacker that never came off the field. With all these other so-called high draft choice players, as you know, Spillane never came off the field. He was terrific with the Raiders. He's a really, really good player. If he can't go, I mean, I don't know if he's injured enough where he can't go, but he's really good, and they're really good at corner. I mean, Gonzalez, Davis, they're really good at corner. Believe it or not, the one area where they've been bad this year is the red zone. Now, you got to get there, obviously, but they've not been a good red zone defense at all.
One last thing, not one last thing, but this I want to talk about. Drake Maye is in the MVP conversation. He's had that kind of year. Yeah. He's playing at a high level, and so you kind of view the Patriots in that respect a lot like teams view the Bills. How far have the Patriots gone? And I know that Josh McDaniel has done what he's done. What about protecting him? It seems they start with protection first and foremost, and whatever happens, Drake Maye is like an egg, man. They do not want to get him cracked, and that they've done a really nice job of giving him plenty of time to see it, study it, and throw it.
And to me, I remember this goes back, I don't know, 15, 18 years when I had a conversation with John Gruden, and he said something to me that has always resonated. And he says, you have no pass game without protection. Mm. And, the bottom line is, would every coach like to send 5 out? Of course they would, because you have 5 eligibles. But if you can't protect your quarterback, then you have no pass game. And you're right, Steve. Now Will Campbell is out. So maybe that's an area that they can exploit to some degree, especially if Bosa is back. But you want to try to speed them up. I think with quarterbacks, look, sacks are great, and people respond to, we had 6 sacks, but you're trying to speed up the quarterback. You're trying to just get him to, because you know how it is. I mean, for a quarterback, they don't have a lot of time to begin with, and if they feel that they have to play faster when they only have 2.5 seconds to begin with, everything starts to happen way too fast. And that's where the changing the picture pre to post snap becomes a bigger deal. Everything sort of becomes a domino effect. So you just want to see if you can squeeze the pocket, get bodies around him, but you still have to be aware. He can run. He's a very good scrambler. So you have to be aware of that too. You have to account for that.
Sure. Right. Last one from me, which is, again, kind of a segue from that. And I'm going to start with an observation of mine. You tell me if you're seeing the same thing, Greg, or you're not. Everything else that you laid out about Drake Maye, I've been super impressed. I was a big fan of his coming out of North Carolina too. The one area that I think he's still playing like a second-year pro this season is taking sacks. And maybe, I don't want to say necessarily drifting into pressure. Have you seen the same thing where there's maybe a few plays where he needs to throw the football away? And that was a problem early on for Josh Allen, too.
Yeah, no, he gets sacked too much. I think he's second or third in the league in number of sacks. And yeah, he does get sacked too much. And, that very often that can be a function of, for whatever reason, you just don't see it as cleanly as you'd like. And then you end up, getting sacked. So we'll see. Look, they need to, like I said, it's not a matter of sacks in this game, but you just want to speed him up. You got to speed him up.
Pressure.
Because if he's comfortable, because he's a very easy thrower, Chris, as you know.
Very
he doesn't
effortless.
work hard to throw the ball. He just looks like a very calm, comfortable player. And, you want to get him out of that. Now, the run game has had moments this year, but it hasn't been, I'm sure, what they've hoped. So you just don't want this to be the week that they feel like they get their run game going. But, the Bills, everybody talks about Josh, and he's so good. But, every week I watch them, and sometimes I sit there and cringe thinking, God, is it just, are they just waiting for Josh to make these incredible plays, which he's capable of? But that's hard. That's a hard road to hoe every week.
Yeah, it is. It's a very, very fine line to walk if you're going to ask your guy to do that, because it's not just about him. If he gets the ball out of his hands, somebody's got to be there to catch it. And it's a high wire act waiting to drop, right?
Yeah, so we'll see. I mean, obviously this is a huge game for the Patriots. They win the division, which would mean the first time in 4 or 5 years that it's not the Bills, something like that, whatever it is, you guys would know. But whereas if they win, not that they've clinched anything, but then they still have a legit shot to win the division, and they're a step closer to the playoffs.
Yeah,
absolutely.
All right, Greg, thanks.
Greg.
Appreciate it. Thanks for joining us. We'll talk to you next week.
All right, guys, thanks so much. Great to be with you.